David, a man after God's own heart, trying to find out how sometimes you hear something once and you say, okay, then this is what God is saying, and it's what he's saying every time. But in 2 Samuel 5, verse 18, the Philistines come to the valley of Rephaim, and God says, David asks God for direction. God says, go, you will break through. 4 verses later, same venue, same enemy, same battle, and God says, don't go. Gives him a very different instruction. Do we run the risk as Christians of getting so familiar with what God says that we assume that once I asked God the last time he said yes, I don't even need to ask him again for this particular instance?
I think it's a very clear example of not using what God said to mean what he's saying. What he said is not the same as what he's saying, because God speaks into situations as they are. And so we don't know what had changed in the battle. And maybe there were things being done on the other side that required a change of approach and a change of tactics. And so when God is leading you, you may think the situation is the same, but God looks at it and sees there are changes you are not seeing now. So his direction may be very different. The leading of the Holy Spirit that's why it requires constant engagement with the Holy Spirit. You can't just go to a mountain, get a word, and live on it throughout. You have to, each day, each moment, listen to him. Hearing from God is not an event. It's an experience.
Wow.
It must be a lifetime experience. It must be something that we are constantly involved in. So I tell people most of the time, if you create events with hearing from God, like somebody says, I want to hear from God, so he goes to fast for 21 days and hears from God. And then he comes. And then you have to make a decision the next minute. Are you going to go another 21 days to hear from God, to come and, So, no, you can't. So at every time you must be in tune with the Holy Spirit. You must be meditative. You must be prayerful. You must be aware of his presence. You must be sensitive to his indications, because you're going to need leading constantly. In a single day, there are many choices that we have to make, and we have to be guided in these choices. So intimacy with the Holy Spirit is very important. And I think intimacy in the Holy Spirit is anchored on reading the scriptures, knowing the scriptures, is anchored in intimate prayer. And when I say intimate prayer, I'm not talking about the prayer warfare's so-called prayer, where people go and shout and scream, and these days there's a lot of monosyllabic tongues, and some is almost symphonic. One person shouts this way, the other person responds with another shout, and there's no awareness of the Holy Spirit. There's no pausing to hear from him. There's no consciousness of talking to God. It's almost an endurance test to know who can pray long and scream longer and jump and stomp. When we do that, we don't develop intimacy with God. We develop religiosity, but not spirituality. Because if you read about the accounts of real people who spend time in the presence of God, you would realize that mostly it was in the quiet moments that they heard from God.
It's true.
Mostly. And people have to learn to be in the presence of God, to be quiet, to talk and to listen, and to talk and to listen. It's a dialogue. We have to develop that constant intimacy. So whether you are driving your car, you are in the office, you are so aware of the Holy Spirit that you're constantly breathing a prayer to him and listening to what he's telling you.
It would almost seem that it's so easy to make a mistake when you listen to what you just shared with us. You realize that it's so easy to walk in error, and I can understand why the disciples say, Lord, increase our faith.
I think so. I think we have over-dramatized spirituality.
Right.
And I get worried when I see over-dramatization of spirituality. And it becomes more religiosity. It's more outward show. And there's no real consciousness of God. There's no cultivating the presence of God, walking in his steps, listening to him, having an obedient heart, having a willing heart. There's not that. It's almost as if we want to twist God's arm to do something for us. So the whole prayer culture has become very manipulative and not submissive, because the purpose of prayer is for us to submit to God, not for God to submit to us. We submit to him. He doesn't submit to us.
Wow.